Good morning. We will begin in just a moment. I will ask for everyone, unless you're speaking, please be sure that your line is muted. That helps us all with audio, that we're not getting feedback from various lines. So I'll ask if you just take a moment, you should be able to find the mute button on your screen, and please use that if you're not speaking. Okay. Good morning again. This is a public hearing pursuant to KRS 13A.270 on Thursday, April 22nd, 2021. The time is 10:01 a.m. This hearing is to receive public comments on the following regulation, 703 KAR 5270, Kentucky's accountability system. My name is Todd Allen, and I serve as the General Counsel for the Kentucky Board of Education. We also have representatives on the line from the Kentucky Department of Education program areas related to this regulation, and I'll pause for just a moment and allow them to introduce themselves.
Good morning, everyone. This is Rhonda Sims. I'm the Associate Commissioner in the Office of Assessment and Accountability. Jennifer, you might want to go next, then Kevin Hill.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Jennifer Stafford. I'm the Director in the Division of Assessment and Accountability Support, and thank you for being here with us today.
Good morning. I'm Kevin Hill. I'm a Director in the Division of Accountability Data and Analysis. And good morning again.
Helen, why don't you start, and then we'll go through our consultants that are online.
Okay. Good morning, I'm Helen Jones, and I am the branch manager in the Division of Assessments Accountability Support, and thank you all for being here today.
Joy?
This is Joy Barr, and I am a consultant in the Office of Assessment and Accountability.
And then I think, Jenny, you might be our last OAA person.
Yes, Jenny Larkins, also in the Office of Assessment and Accountability.
Right. Todd, I believe that's all of the staff we have from the program area.
Thank you. Pursuant to KRS 13A.270 and 280, a statement of consideration will be drafted by the Department of Education staff in response to the comments heard today and the written comments received during the comment period. Written comments shall be accepted through April 30th. The Kentucky Board of Education and Kentucky Department of Education will respond to all comments received in a statement of consideration. After review of the comments received, the Kentucky Board of Education will determine whether it will amend this regulation or decline to make any suggested amendments. The statement of consideration or an extension request will be filed with the Legislative Research Commission's regulations compiler on or before noon on May 15th. If an extension request is filed, the statement of consideration will be filed with the LRC regulations compiler on or before noon on June 15th. The final statement of consideration will be posted to the KDE website at the KDE Public Hearing Information page. The purpose of this hearing is for the agency to hear and record your comments. The agency will not respond to your comments today, but will respond to all comments through the statement of consideration. We may, however, ask procedural questions about the regulatory process. There are 2 registered speakers today. KRS 13A.270 guarantees each person who wishes to offer a comment a fair and reasonable opportunity to do so. Typically, we limit commenters to 5 minutes each, but since we only have 2 today, I think we can extend that to 10 minutes each to allow everyone to fully raise up their comments to the agency. After speaking, you may still file written comments until April 30th. At the conclusion of the registered speakers, any additional time will be allotted for any additional comments. These proceedings are being recorded. A web link will be available in lieu of written transcripts unless an attendee has requested and pays for a written transcript pursuant to KRS 13A.27011. When I call your name, please unmute your line, state your name for the record and any affiliation if you are representing a group or entity. The first speaker who registered to speak is Perry Papka.
Thank you, General Counsel Allen, and for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Perry Papka. I currently serve as Deputy Director of the Pritchard Committee for Academic Excellence, a statewide solutions-oriented, citizen-led nonprofit established in 1983. We believe public education, early childhood through post-secondary, is critical to the economic and social well-being of Kentucky, requiring an ambitious agenda that ensures educational success for each Kentuckian. Thank you again for the opportunity today to provide comments on behalf of the Pritchard Committee regarding the proposed amendments to Kentucky's School Accountability Regulation 703 KAR 5270. The Pritchard Committee has supported school and district accountability since 1990. We believe students will be well served by an accountability model that uses consistent statewide data to invite communities to celebrate growth, identify challenges, and build shared solutions to strengthening what students know and are able to do. Promote difficult conversations and important collaborations around delivering fully for underserved student groups. Make resource decisions that support and funding to serve students effectively, and provide useful evidence and effective supports for building Kentucky's big, bold future. Our comments on the regulation today urge two specific changes. First, we recommend that Section 4, Paragraph 11, Subparagraph C of the current regulation should not be amended. The regulation now in effect states that student demographic groups shall have a minimum of 10 students to be included in school rating calculations, and we feel that language should remain as is. Limiting the dashboard reporting groups to 30 students per school, as proposed in the amendments to the regulation, will sharply reduce the accountability model's impact and the transparency of data on the school dashboard reporting of status, change, and performance levels. For example, for high schools, the proposed amendment would cut the number of schools accountable for delivering excellence and equity, for Black students by half, for Latino students by 2/3, and for students with disabilities by 4/5. Second, the second sentence in Section 5, Paragraph 3 on additional public reporting requirements should be clarified to read, in our suggestion, that academic achievement goals and annual data for each student group of 10 or more students shall be reported on the school report card and used to implement KRS 158-649. KRS 158-649 is Kentucky's statute on targeting achievement gaps in school planning and in actions by superintendents, local boards, the Commissioner of Education, and the Department of Education. The statute is named in the previous sentence of Section 5, Paragraph 3, reading that the goal for academic achievement operationalizes both the improvement of proficient and distinguished performance for all students and each student group, and the reduction of achievement gaps as defined in KRS 158-649. The proposed wording in the amendment does not explicitly connect these two sentences and does not make fully clear that the groups of 10 or more will be used for the implementation of KRS 158-649 to address achievement gaps, and leaves room for an interpretation that would use some other group size for setting goals, displaying those goals, and reporting on whether results for specific student groups show gaps from those goals. We feel more clarity, as in our suggested language, will remove that possible interpretation and leave no doubt about which group size will be used for legally required work on achievement gaps and meet the intentions of the General Assembly outlined in KRS 158-649. In closing, last summer, the Kentucky Board of Education called for education leaders across the Commonwealth to examine policies, procedures, and funding decisions to ensure that children of every race have equal access to educational opportunities. These group size decisions will affect statewide work on opportunity for student groups who have historically been underserved, including African American students, Hispanic and Latino students, students of 2 or more races, along with students identified as English learners and students with identified disabilities. That is why today we respectfully urge the Kentucky Board of Education to re-examine the policy decisions being made in the proposed amendments and return to the 10 student group rule for dashboard and accountability use, and clarify the expectation that 10 count student groups will be used for performance goals, gap analysis, and gap reduction under KRS 158649. Thank you again for considering these two requests and for your dedication to excellence and equity for each and every child in Kentucky. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today. Those conclude my remarks, and we have submitted written remarks to the board as well that reflect these comments today.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Papka, and those have been received. Our next registered speaker, our final registered speaker, is Judith Bradley. Ms. Bradley, if you will unmute your line and provide your comments.
Thank you and good morning, General Counsel, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide comments on behalf of Jack B. Nimble. We are a Kentucky-based network of special education families, educators seeking to improve outcomes for students throughout the state and work in collaboration with educators and schools. First, I also really appreciate the opportunity to provide the input, and we recognize the complexity of developing a system with so many different subgroups. We concur fully with and agree with the Pritchard Committee's comments that Mr. Papka just made, and would add the following. And we also have submitted a letter to the board which has been updated and some comments this morning prior to the meeting. I am going to go through some minor issues. Well, they're not minor to us, line by line, and then make a few comments at the end regarding the big picture. So on the very first line, page 1, line 6 of the regulation, 703 KAR 5270, we are respectfully suggesting that you add KRS 158649 and 160346, as Mr. Papka just pointed out. This regulation references both. They are also referenced in SB 158, and so they should therefore be included in this list. On page 2, lines 8 through 9, under the definitions section, the proposal is removing some definitions, but it is retaining on line 8 the definition for federal student group designation. We suggest, however, that this should be removed because it is no longer a state indicator permitted under SB 158. And furthermore, it's not used throughout all of the referenced, actually any of the referenced regulations. Additionally, under the definitions section, lines 10 through 13, and I'm sorry I don't have all the section numbers noted, there is a need, we believe, for defining subgroup of students, also used throughout the ESSA regulation that we're referring to, as well as other KRS and KR regulations that this pertains to. So our suggestion is to use the explicit definition subgroup of students to mean exactly what is referenced by ESSA, and we've provided it. And just to call everyone's attention to that, the ESSA definition provides that subgroup of students means A, economically disadvantaged students, B, students from major racial and ethnic groups, C, children with disabilities, D, English learners, E, students, or I'm sorry, that's where it ends. Additionally, however, section 6311 of 20 USC also notes that a state is required to be accountable to compare students who are not economically disadvantaged with those who are, and children without disabilities with those who have them. So we are proposing adding those two items as well. Clearly, the rationale here is that the subgroups have to be defined in order to be held accountable, and for the for any of the indicators to make sense, and we can't find any place where they've actually been defined. On page 3 of the regulation, line 15, for clarity's sake, we suggest adding following high school graduation to the sentence, and just to make clear that post-secondary transition was removed, but just to make really clear that that's what we're talking about. Moving on to page 5. On lines 19 through 22 of that page, with respect to achieving academic readiness or career readiness, we are requesting that the board consider that the majority of the students just mentioned in those subgroups, many do not have access to the accelerated and or advanced options listed here. So they may, in fact, there may be a substantial minority of students who could not fulfill the requirement provided here. So they could have other ways, of course, to achieve academic or display academic readiness, but our comment is that if the state is going to include these in the regulation, that it is possible to also include an indicator of whether or not the school has provided access to these. So we suggest doing that as well. Let's see, excuse me one moment. Thank you. Okay. On page 6, I'm going to skip that. Page 8, there are 3 places again where we've pointed out that the term federal student group designation under the classification of schools and LEAs in the state accountability system for elementary school, middle school, and high schools. This is actually section 3. On page 8, it begins with line 2, which is referencing the previous page for elementary schools. Again, we are suggesting that term be removed because under SB 158, section 1(1)B, it is not a state indicator permitted. That the Senate bill is explicit about what is permitted, and federal student group designation is not a permitted indicator. Page 15, lines 10 through 11. Again, to echo the Prisher Committee and Mr. Papka's comments regarding how the minimum is calculated, because we are very concerned about the outcomes and performance for students with disabilities, which the state report card notes to be substantially lower than other student groups. We also feel very strongly that eliminated such a significant number of high schools from the system will be detrimental. And in our letter to the board, and I want to reiterate this, we pointed out that our understanding of the purpose of the accountability system is not, in fact, to punish schools, but we hope the intention is to actually provide additional support in places that might be helpful for them to better meet the needs of these students. So we are recommending either a return to the previous language of an N of 10 per grade. And I'm sorry about the background noise here. I hope it's not too problematic for you. A return to the minimum of 10 students per grade, or alternatively, our initial analysis shows that perhaps an N of 10 per school would eliminate this problem. So we are asking the Board of Education, again reiterated in our letter, which has been reissued today with additional signatures. We're asking the board to please reconsider some options to how that is calculated to ensure the inclusion of this subgroup and all of the others mentioned. And then two additional comments. One is on page 15, also line 17. This is a request to add to the list of advisory groups to be consulted and participate in establishing the standard setting process. We request that the Kentucky State Advisory Council for Exceptional Children be added to the list. So the rationale behind this is they, first of all, under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Section 1412, A, 21A, and this is on the comments that I submitted, the state is required to establish and maintain an advisory panel for the purpose of providing policy guidance. ESSA requires that our accountability system be in compliance with the IDEA as is stated, and this would assist that aim greatly. In addition, the executive order signed under the previous administration, Executive Order 2018-581 in July of 2018, established the State Advisory Council for Education to advise the state agency of unmet needs, to publicly comment on any rules or regulations proposed by the state regarding the education of students with disabilities. And since students with disabilities are students first and foremost, it would make sense to include them here. And also specifically to advise the General Assembly, Department of Education, Board of Education, Education Professional Standards Board, and School Curriculum and Accountability Council of unmet needs and desired program changes related to the education of children with disabilities, including proposed corrective action plans and personnel development needs. We feel that by including them here, number one, not only is it appropriate, but secondly, it's required. But most importantly, it would also accomplish really ensuring that the accountability system measures and goals are consistent with the needs of the subgroup that you just heard would be most dramatically impacted by changes to the minimum size. So in closing, you know, again, there are almost, in some districts, 20% of our students who actually have disabilities. That is taking into consideration students with Section 504 plans who are frequently not counted. And that's something I didn't mention earlier. The ESSA definition of subgroups of students does not reference students with IEPs, it references children with disabilities. So I want to point that out, and we encourage Kentucky to adopt the language of the federal law. But most importantly, our comments really relate to the opportunity to involve proactively groups not only like ours, but others as well in the development of these regulations. So on that note, we do really appreciate this open forum and encourage the state to look at ways for the collaboration to begin even earlier. So thank you very much, and that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. That concludes all of the registered speakers that we have today. However, I'll pause for just a moment to see if there's anyone else attending who did not register to speak but wishes to do so at this time. If so, please unmute your line and announce yourself. Okay, hearing no one. On behalf of the Kentucky Board of Education, the Commissioner of Education, and Kentucky Department of Education staff, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to participate in the hearing and public comment process. Your participation is an essential part of the regulatory process and ensures that the Kentucky Board of Education and KDE staff has access to critical information that may be necessary to alter or amend the regulation at issue. I'm going to end the recording now. We will close the meeting, and again, all comments received, whether during this public hearing or in written form, will be responded to in a statement of consideration that will be posted to the KDE website. Thank you all. Have a great day.